Good morning, everyone. We are learning Lila Nishmas Mendel, Mariam Vas Kalman Reuven, her Neshama Shem Aliyah. We are up to, I don't know what we're up to. I'm up to Kaf Yud Beis by the strings of a hat. Is that what you're up to? Chute Svacha? Or did you stop at Miftach Chaluka?
Well, we did that? Yeah. That's where I am.
You're up to Ritzis Menachos. Okay, so I'm just going to go back a few lines. Okay, fine. Good. Max, you got ahead of me. Amazing. Okay. V'chudei Svacha. Let's just go back a few lines to the strings of a hat. So the Gemara is asking on the case of the Mishnah, these are, again, the basic principle is knots which are going to be untied, which are meant to not be staying on for a very long time. We're in 112A1. V'chudei Svacha. Okay, it's by the two dots, like 6 lines or 7 lines down. V'chudei Svacha, strings of a hat. So the Gemara says that is something which is totally permitted. It says the Gemara, Pshita. Obviously it's permitted because it goes on and off. So Gemara says, Lo tzricha, no, it is necessary, dervicha la, because the hat, we're talking about a case where the hat is loose. So madate mishlaf shalfa la. You may think that since the hat is loose, the woman's going to slip it off without first untying the knot. Right, because once it's loose, then you could easily just put it on and take it off without actually having tying it, without untying it, and therefore maybe you would consider it a permanent knot, and therefore it should be aser. The woman is afraid, is careful about her hair, umishra shayla, and therefore will untie the hat before removing. In other words, if you slip it off, you're going to ruin your hair, and therefore, although an argument can be made that by definition that when it's loose, then a person's not going to go ahead and untie it each time. And that since typically a woman will untie it because she's concerned for her hair, and if she slips it off, it's going to ruin her hair. Therefore, it is considered a non-permanent knot, and therefore permitted to. Therefore, untying it on Shabbos is going to be fine. So, just there's an important principle that's coming out of this whole discussion. That is that sometimes it's not about the knot per se; it's more about how long that knot is going to stay. Right? In other words, there's two ways of looking at the permanency of a knot. Is it about the type of knot, meaning like a slip knot, right? Where you're just doing like that bow, where you could easily just pull off like one string. That's okay. That's by definition not permanent. But as opposed to, let's say, a double knot, which one might say is permanent. But over here, seeing from this Gemara, that part of the discussion is how long is it practically going to stay, regardless of the type of knot. And that leads to a big machlokas about, I mentioned on the recording yesterday, about garbage bags. Okay, so a garbage bag, even if you tie a bow, right, which is by definition, you could one hand, right? We saw that one hand, you could easily untie it. But when do you plan on undoing your garbage bag? Never, right? And therefore, there are many poskim who actually say that tying a garbage bag is problematic because the fact that it is by definition something going to stay regardless of the type of knot or even bow that you're going to use. And therefore, there are many poskim who say that when it comes to a garbage bag on Shabbos and Yom Tov, you should really just not tie it at all. Basically, you could take like the strings and just pull it, like make there's probably terms for this, but like the bottom part of before you start making the knot, like one crossover. What's the word? Is there a word for it? The crossover, you know what I'm talking about, right? Basically, just like before you start, just pull it, but without making a bow because of this issue. And probably best there is what to rely upon to say no. By definition, it's something which is non-permanent because of the nature of the knot. But again, there's a compelling argument to be made based on these Gemaras that no, since it's something you plan on keeping forever, therefore it is usher even to make a bow, and therefore probably best to just make just pull it together. Pull it together like the bottom part of a bow, and then put it in the garbage. Make sure you're not putting it upside down because it's going to go everywhere. And probably the better thing to do on Shabbos and Yom Tov based on these Gemaras. Okay.
Without tying it, you could, I don't know, so you had a bunch of rubber bands, you could just...
Yeah, a rubber band would be fine. There's no tying at all. Right. You use a clip. You could secure it. Yeah, I mean, a rubber band on a garbage bag can be a little hard, but yeah.
Whatever, you have it, and you just put that over the top.
Yeah, that's fine. Anything that's not going to be tying, like you use like a big clip, like they use a clip on like a bag or something like that. Yeah, anything like that would be fine. But in terms of tying, any tie that, since it's going to be permanent, better not to. Okay. Sorry?
Just following up on the garbage bag. Okay, if you took a string
Mm-hmm.
and you wanted to have a lump in it, and you just took the string, turned it around one time, and pulled it tight.
Yeah.
It's not holding anything.
Right.
Is that a knot?
So again, what's the case that you turn it around? What do you mean turn it around?
I am the string.
Okay. Yeah, like that.
Pull it tight.
Yeah. That's fine.
That's not enough.
That's not a knot, right? That's not a knot. That's just basically
Pull it tight.
you pull it tight. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. So that's like that's what I meant by the bottom of like a knot. Before you make the bow, before you make the knot, that's what you do. Just pull it together, and it's not a knot at all. Meaning, if anything comes along, it'll just
But
open
I'm
it.
not even talking about the garbage can now. I'm just talking about a string.
Right, I guess. But yeah, the same thing. It's not a knot.
Okay.
It's not a knot. Yeah. Okay, good. Rutsuas middle of a sandal. Straps of a shoe or sandal. Okay, so the Gemara now is going to point out that there's a couple of brisas. Each one has a different ruling on sandals and shoes. So Itmar, on 112a2. Okay, Itmar was taught Hitter Rutsuas middle of a sandal, person who unties the straps of a shoe or sandal. Tani Chada, one brisa taught this case and said, Chayv chatas. If you untie the straps of a shoe or sandal, you are going to be chayv chatas. V'tani idach. We have another brisa that says pater aval aser, that you are not going to be chayv biblically, but it is prohibited rabbinically. Okay, to untie this knot, the knot of a strap of a shoe or sandal. V'tani idach, and a third brisa that says mutar l'chatchila. It's allowed completely. You're allowed to completely untie it, and there's no issue whatsoever. So you have three brisas, each talking about the same case of undoing the knot of a shoe and sandal. And each one says different, one says chayiv chatas, which means it's biblically prohibited. One says rabbinically prohibited, and one says it's completely permitted to do so. So kasha minal minal, the brisa's rulings are contradictory when it comes to shoes. Kasha sandal sandal is contradictory when it comes to sandals. The Gemara is going to suggest a way of understanding that there are different scenarios of shoes and sandals, and therefore no contradictions. Let's see. Minal minal kasha, there's no contradiction when it comes to shoes. Haditani chayiv chatas, the brisa which said that you're chayiv achatas, bidu ushkape. We're talking about the knot of a shoemaker. So what that means is as follows. The shoemaker makes the shoe, there's a string that's going to be ultimately used, but the initial string is knotted into the shoe in a way that's supposed to last permanently. Okay, so imagine, I'm trying to think of like our shoes, like on the bottom of our shoe, even our shoes, like the bottom of our, the beginning of where the shoelace goes in, for us, we kind of put it through loops. But imagine at that loop, they knot it in, and the goal is that's never going to be undone. It's the top knot that's going to be undone. But the bottom knot is meant to stay there to keep the shoelace there. So we don't knot it, we put it through a loop, but that's the basic idea. I understand? It's something which is there permanently. Okay? Pater vel aser, when the brisa said that it's something which is only aser rabbinically, but Rabbanan, we're talking about the rabbi's shoes. What does it mean, the rabbi's shoes? So this is fascinating. So rabbis, meaning those who spent their time learning, they would not have to wear their shoes very tightly because they didn't walk around a lot. They would spend their time in a base medrash. So they would have their shoes, very loose shoes. It's very popular. You go to a yeshiva, I don't know, now everyone's wearing cool shoes, but back in the day, like wearing like slip-ons was pretty popular. There wasn't a lot of, you're not walking around a lot, right? Basically, you're just like, you're sitting and learning. So having a shoe, their shoes, were tied very loosely because they wouldn't be so concerned about their shoes falling off. A person walking around all day, in a certain setting, then they have to wear their shoes very tightly. But imagine anyone sitting at a desk job, right? That's equivalent to the rabbis. In other words, they're not tying their shoes so tightly. Occasionally, as the Farshim point out, in the rainy season, different times, then they're occasionally going to undo their shoe and tie it very tightly, and then undo it and bring it back loosely. So it wasn't completely permanent. It was semi-permanent, and therefore, pater aval aser, meaning they didn't always leave their shoes tied the same way, because once in a while, based on the season, they would say, okay, if it's the rainy season, they're walking through the mud, they'd have to, undo the loose knot and redo it and tie it tightly. So that's, again, if it's permanent, aser completely, like the shoemaker's knot. But the rabbi shoes, meaning the person who's sitting in a desk job, that person has their shoe tied loosely, but occasionally they tie tightly, so the knots that they would use is semi-permanent, but not permanent enough. Okay? And then, what's the case? That refers to the inhabitants of Mechoza. I don't know if maybe it's just me reading into it, but the rabbis, the people of Mechoza, we've mentioned them a couple of times. They were like, what do we know of the people of Mechoza? They were like the fashion, the whatever. They were like the, what's the word I'm looking for? They were always like they were the city dwellers, and they would dress in a very meticulous way. Okay, so we spoke about earlier about their shirts all the way at the beginning. If you remember, their shirts were like, their sleeves were very long because they didn't get themselves like involved in labor. They were very stylish, and they would tie their shoes very tightly for it to be a snug fit. But because it was so tight, at the end of every day they'd have to untie it. So it's going to, by definition, be something which doesn't last forever. right? And that's why it's mutter lechatchila. Okay, sandal as sandal akasha. So we've addressed the contradictions when it comes to shoes. Now let's focus on sandals. Okay, haditani chayiv chatas. That we said it's liable. You're liable for a chatas. Bid tayai dekatre ushkape. We're talking about the knots of sandals of Arabian merchants, which the shoemakers tie. Okay, so the beginning of when the sandals, where the strap comes out. So how does the strap get attached to the sole? Okay, so you have a knot that tied it to the sole. That sole was something which was permanent, is now not going to be released. Panchavel asar, that we said it's prohibited rabbinically. Okay, b'chumarta dekatri inhu. Okay, that's the amateur knot, which is the second knot tied by the wearer themselves. So sandals would oftentimes stay tied for a long time, but they would sometimes be untied. So again, the initial knot of the strap on the bottom of the sandal, that's tied professionally. That's a permanent knot. Asar. Completely asr midaraisa. And then the second knot, which is where it ties on the other side of the shoe, that was tied for long periods of time, but not forever, and therefore it's rabbinically prohibited. Okay, when we say that it's permitted entirely, that refers to a sandal which two people would wear. What does it mean two people would wear? So keep in mind, they did not have the same abundance that we have, and sometimes you'd have two people who would wear the same sandal, and they'd be different sizes. So what would you do? Each time you adjust it. So sometimes they go, there's a story of, who is it, the Ketsos, and I forget the real name, their names. The author of the Ketsos and the author of his brother. I forget who it is. Okay, whatever. There's a story about some two of the greatest Chaber Sfarim. What's his name? Okay, whatever it is. They had one shirt. They had one shirt that the brothers would share. One day one brother would go to yeshiva, the other day the other brother would go to yeshiva. They had nothing, literally nothing. It's the same thing. They have one sandal, one pair of sandals. One day daddy would go to work, the other day, son would go to school, other day mom would go to here. Basically they would keep on adjusting the same sandal, depends on who's wearing it. So there, by definition, they're switching it up all the time. Okay, and that's something which is mutter completely, because it's something which is completely non-permanent. Yeah. Okay. We have a story that illustrates this. Rav Yehuda. We have a story of Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda, Achua, Rav Salah, Chasida, Havile, Ahu, Zuga de Sandale. Rav Yehuda, the brother of Salah, the Chassid, had a pair of sandals. Zimnin nafik be'ihu. Sometimes he would go out with it. Zimnin nafik be'inukai. Sometimes his son would go out with the same sandals. Asla kamed Abaye, came in front of Abaye. Amarle kahai gavad Abaye. What's the halacha in this case? Am I allowed to untie this knot on Shabbos so my son's allowed to wear it? Amarle chayv chatas. If you do so, you're chayv chatas. Amarle, Rav Yehuda said, what? Hashta patv asr kakashli. Okay, he said, I was asking because I thought maybe it's rabbinically prohibited. I didn't even think it'd be asr min chayv chatas ka Amarle. You want to tell me you're chayv chatas? So my time, Abai says, what's your issue with what I'm saying? Amalei mishum b'chol nami, because in the weekdays too, zimnin nefikna be ana, zimnin nafik be yanuka. Because sometimes I go out with these shoes, sometimes my child goes out with these shoes. So he never really explained to Abaye what the case was. Amalei ihachi mutlachila. Abaye says, I didn't realize it was a shoe. There was a sandal that was shared with you and your son. In which case, it is permitted entirely, and not even asur rabbinically. Okay? Another story. Rav Yirmiyah, which is going to bring out halach. Rav Yirmiyah havika azli basreid Ravuah bekarmelis. Rav Yirmiyah was walking behind Ravo in a Carmelis. Ifsik ritzua de sandale. And the strap of his sandal broke. Okay, now, very, very important halacha, not so well known. When something breaks, it becomes muksa. It no longer is functional. Okay, so this happens, again, I think we speak about this for glasses, right? Glasses, when they break, people walk around, you have the screw and whatever it is, and they're carrying all the stuff. It's completely muksa, right? If it falls down, there is one dispensation, as long as it's still in your hand. Like, if you, have something in your hand and it breaks, then you're allowed to move it somewhere. But let's say your glass, I don't know, someone hits your glasses fall down, and now the glass is on the floor, and they're broken. They're muksa. You can't move them. So over here too, the sandal breaks off, and it falls off his foot. And the question is, what should you do? Amrle. So my navile, what could I do with it? So Amrle, Ravo said, Shkol gemi lach dechazi lamachal behema. Take a moist reed that's fit for animal food. In other words, something which is non-muksa. Okay, a string which is non-muksa. A moist reed is usable for food, and therefore it's non-muksa. Uchrochi lave, and winds it around the sandal. Okay, and then you're allowed to walk with it. Okay, because then it's a somewhat functional sandal. Abaye, okay, but a similar story. Abaye havikai kamed Rav Yosef. Abaye was standing in a courtyard in front of Rav Yosef. If zikle ritzu, Abaye's sandal fell off. Amarle said to Rav Yosef, "My avile." He said, "What am I allowed to do with it?" Amarle shafke, leave it there. It's muksa. You can't move it. Okay, so now you have a contradiction. Okay, we have one story where Rav Yirmiyah said, where Ravo said you're allowed to tie a string around it, and then you have this other story. Rav Yosef said you got to leave it, you can't move it. It's muksa. So Ma'ishnam Rav Yirmiyah. Why is this case different? In other words, why in one case is it allowed, in one case it's not? So Hasam lo mintar, Hacha mintar. The difference is in one case. In the case where it was permitted to put the moist reed is because it was the sandal was not guarded. It was in a place where if you would have left the sandal there, it would have been stolen, it would have been taken away. And therefore, this is the way Rashi learns it, although some of the Rishonim don't like this, it seems like there's a special dispensation to be a little bit more lenient in the laws of muksa because of a financial loss. Whereas in the other case, there's no financial loss, just leave it there, and therefore there is no dispensation, you just have to leave your shoe there, too bad. Now, some of the Rishonim take issue with this. They point out that we don't find anywhere that there is any distinction about financial loss when it comes to muksa. Too bad. In other words, we don't find anywhere else that there is this notion of a financial loss, and therefore some want to say that in a scenario where it is in a place where it's going to be lost, it's not that because of financial loss we let you do it. It's just that in a scenario where it's going to be lost if you don't wear it, you'll wear the shoe even if it's worn awkwardly. In other words, if you know you're going to lose it, then from your perspective, I want to wear the shoe in a funny way, even if it's going to be like slipping off or whatever it is. Sometimes, whatever it is, I'd rather do that, so I'll keep it, and therefore it's still considered functional. Whereas if it's left in a place where you won't lose it, you won't really push yourself to wear the shoe. So it's less about financial loss being the dispensation. It's more about because it's in a place where you'll lose it, you'll therefore consider it wearable, even if it's not so typically wearable. Make sense?
So that doesn't generalize to our situation with the glasses most of the time.
Correct.
You're only going to move it so you can fix it later.
Correct, unless you want to say that if it's going to be lost, again, it wouldn't work for like the handle of it, but it'll work for, let's say you have what's this thing called? Whatever, one side of it breaks off, like that, like there's nothing to do because it's a loss. But let's say the lenses, right? Even if it's missing the what's this thing called? Has a word. The thing on the side. I don't know. Okay, glasses wearers. Come on, help me out. Whatever it is. This part would be... so yes, the nafkamina would be, according to the Rashi's way of understanding it, we'll say I'm allowed to keep even the side part because there's a financial loss. But according to the way that the most Rishonim learn it, I will be able to wear this because although I typically wouldn't wear my glasses like this, without the side part, in a typical scenario, but if I know I'm going to lose my glasses, I'll say this is wearable enough that I'd want to wear this. And therefore, that would be the nafkamina between the two approaches. Yes, good point. Thank you. Okay, ask the Gemara, Manahu. At the end of the day, the Gemara Abai asks, I don't understand. The sandal is considered a utensil, because I could change it from the right foot to the left foot. In other words, at the end of the day, granted one of the straps came out, but I could always switch it to the other foot, in which case it would still work. And therefore, he's asking, why are you making it that it's considered muksa, like it's no longer functional? So he's saying at the end of the day, I could switch sides. So what he means is as follows. When a strap breaks, the assumption is like this. When the strap breaks, the question is, how strange does a shoe have to be that a person would no longer wear it? Okay, so meaning if your shoe, I don't know, let's just take our shoes for a second. If like the top of the shoe, the tongue of the shoe, all of a sudden is missing, like it looks weird. You're not going to wear your shoe if like the top part's missing. Okay, it looks weird. But if there is so let's say one side of a sandal has, there's a knot on one side. There's a knot on usually the inside, and then there's a knot on the outside, right? There's a knot on two sides. So let's say the knot on one side breaks. Okay, so the understanding, the understanding over here is that if the knot on one side breaks, it looks funny. But Abai is pointing out I could switch sides, and therefore the knot is now only missing on the inside, and it doesn't look as bad. Right? In other words, depends on which side it's, right? Sometimes if you have like I have like a stain on one side of the shoe is like scuffed up, like outside of the shoe is scuffed up, it's a little more embarrassing. If the inside of the shoe is scuffed up, okay, it's not as embarrassing, people don't notice it. It's the same thing. If the knot, granted the knot is broken on the outside, it looks strange. But he says, but I could switch shoes, I could wear them, so again, the shoes are not as beautifully tailored around the foot. I could switch sides, in which case it should no longer be muksa because it's still functional if I switch feet. Okay, that's a biased question, and so let's see. Fine, so let's see the answer. Amalei, so he says no. There is a debate, as we're about to see, between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan about switching something, about a shoe that the outer part is broken, and a person does have the ability to switch it from the right foot to the left foot, in which case it will be the inner side, and therefore it should be allowed. but we see Rabbi Yehuda arguing on this, and we see the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore it would still be not considered a shoe. Okay, so let's see what the example is. It's a bit of a long. Let's read this quickly. Mahi, what are we referring to when we say that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda? Okay, Titania, we have a brisa. Sandal shnefsku shtei aznav, a sandal from which both ears broke off. O shtei tarsios, over both of its strap holders. Basically, these are things which go on both sides of the shoes. O shnitzal kol hakafshlo, or the entire sole was removed. Tahar, it becomes tahar. Okay, general rule of tuma and tahar, which we've learned many times, and that is when you have a utensil and it no longer is considered functional. It's a utensil that is tameh, and then it becomes no longer functional. What is the status of the utensil? It becomes tar, right? If you have a jug and the jug now has a huge puncture in it, then what's halacha? It becomes tar. We've seen that halacha many times. So a shoe, if both sides of the shoe become ruined, right? Both ears of the shoe become ruined, or both knots of the shoe become ruined, or the sole is removed, it's complete tar. Achas miaznav, if one of the ears, o achas mitarsi yosef, or one of its strap holders, o shnito rova kafshalo, or most but not all of the sole was removed, tameh, it's still tameh. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, nifska pnimis tameh, if the inner strap is broken, it's tameh. Hachitzona, but the outer one, the one that people see, then it loses its status and it becomes tahar. So what's Rabbi Yehuda ultimately saying? Now, what's the machlokes between the Rabban and Rabbi Yehuda in this brisa? Rabbi Yehuda says that the outer strap breaks, it's now tahar because it's no longer functional. The Rabbanan say no, if the outer strap breaks, it's considered tameh still. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda's clearly holding that even though theoretically I could switch, it doesn't matter. And the Rabbanan say no, I could switch and therefore it still has a function. Right? So that's machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan. Va'amar ula v'tem Rabba bar Rachana am Rav Yochanan. And then we had a statement of Rav Yochanan on this machlokas, and he says the machlokas l'nyan tuma, just as the machlokas is regarding tuma, kach machlokas l'nyan Shabbos, so too the machlokas is regarding Shabbos. In other words, it's the same principle. And then he says alo le'inyan chalitza, but not in regards to chalitza. Chalitza, the halacha is they have to remove the shoe of the brother of the deceased, and you spit in it. It has to be the appropriate shoe. Okay, so the question though is, the Gemara asks, Rav Yochanan Libra Daman, when Rav Yochanan made the statement of, the machlokas is regarding Tumah, the same machlokas is regarding Shabbos, but not regards to Chalitza, who is he referring to? Whose opinion was he endorsing in saying this? If you want to say that he was saying his statements according to the Rabbanan, meaning the first opinion of the Brisa, and he was saying like this: since in regards to Tuma, if one strap breaks off, it's still considered tameh. Lidin Shabbos nami manahave, and therefore regarding Shabbos, it's still considered a utensil. Avalo lechalitza, but not regarding chalitza. Delav manahu, that it's not considered a utensil, and therefore a person doing chalitza with a sandal with one ear gone or one side gone, it's not good chalitza. That's not. How could that be? Because we have a Mishnah which says explicitly, cholza shel small biyamin. If a person removed the left foot sandal from the right foot, meaning if the guy was wearing the sandal on the wrong foot, chalitza sikshir, the chalitza is kasher. So meaning everyone would agree if it's on the wrong foot, it's still kasher. So it can't be the Rav Yochanan statement was going according to Rabbanan. Ve'alibad Rav Yehuda. Rather, he was saying his statement in regards to Yehuda, and it reads like this: Midla inyan tuma lav manahu. Since Rav Yehuda holds that in regards to tuma, it's not considered a utensil. Linin Shabbos nami la manahu. Therefore, regarding Shabbos, a one ear missing is also not a utensil. Okay, avalo lechalitza. But when it comes to chalitza, demanahu, it is considered a utensil. Okay, so maybe that's the way to read it. Okay, levalo lechalitza is saying that by chalitza it is a utensil. Ask the Gemara, Eimer darmin chaltza shel small b'yamin chalitza shera. But that can't be. If you want to tell me that regarding chalitza it is utensil, but you're also telling me it's not considered a proper utensil for other things, then when do we say that if a woman removes the left from the right, the Mishnah said you move the left from the right, is where it's considered a utensil, meaning it's still functional. But over here, according to you, Rabbi Yehuda, it's not considered a proper shoe at all. Rabbi Yehuda, nifska chitzona tahar, because you said that if the outer strap broke, it's tahar. Obviously, it's not a utensil. So again, just to summarize, if it's getting a little hard to follow, basically, Rabbi Yehuda is telling us that if one strap is missing, it's not considered a utensil at all. So you can't tell me it's not considered a utensil for Shabbos, not considered a utensil regarding Tumah, but for Chalitza it is considered a utensil? There's no way. Chalitza is going to be more machmir. So La'olam Aliv Rav Yehuda. Really, Rav Yochanan made a statement according to Rav Yehuda. Ema, and this is the way we have to amend the statement a little bit. V'chein lechalitza, and the same is true for chalitza, meaning like this. V'akamash malan, and what he's teaching us, Techi Amrin Chaltza Shel Small B'Shal Yam and Chalitza Shera, and that we said if you remove the left sandal from the right foot, the chalitza is still kosher. Heicha de Lamilse Manahu. That's only if the sandal is still considered functional for wearing. Aval hacha, but over here where the left sandal, outer strap holder broke, lemilsa lamanahu, it's no longer functional for its own use, therefore the chalitza performed with it is invalid. The bottom line, what comes out of this whole little read, a little bit of a hard price over here, is that Rav Yochanan seemingly is following the opinion of Rav Yehuda, who said that if one of the straps is missing, if one of the outer strap is missing, even though technically you could switch it, it doesn't matter, it's not a good shoe, and that's why he was told to leave the shoe outside, because we're passing because Rav Yochanan passes like Rav Yehuda, who holds that if one side is missing, it's no longer valid, and therefore he said, if your strap breaks outside, you have to leave it there. Okay, we'll come back, we'll review this a little bit tomorrow. Have a great day.